Here we'll illustrate the use of Riffyn to query multiple experiments and/or processes at the same time from an external application. This is accomplished by interfacing that application with Riffyn through its programmable API. And in this example, I'm going to use JMP to pull the data tables on 3 different processes and experiments, actually 4 experiments on 3 different processes. So first, let me open JMP, and we've written an add-in for JMP that allows you to query the data from Riffyn. So I simply execute that add-in. It opens this query window where I set the API server, my login credentials, and then I need to enter the experiment and process IDs from Riffyn. So you get those from the URL of the process or experiment you're looking at. Here is a variance analysis experiment on a cell culture process, and here's the ID of that experiment. That's a unique ID, so I can just put that in the query string and it'll get all the data on that experiment. And then a semicolon, and I can enter one more. Here I'm going to also get the data from this time series experiment on fermentation. Back to the query window. And then finally, I want to get not an experiment, but all the experiments on this particular process, this animal study process. There's 3 experiments. And in fact, perhaps I only want to get a slice. I want to get experiment 1 and 2. Well, I can do that as well. Go back to the query, whoops. Grab the process ID, not the experiment ID. Put that in the query window, a colon, and then a bracket with a range or comma-separated list of experiments that you want to get within that process. And that's it. Press OK. And this add-in will go out to the Riffyn API and fetch the experiments on each of those processes. Once it's retrieved the experiments, it will assemble them all together into a single data table for each process and then present those combined data tables for use and analysis in any program. So here we've got the cell culture process, the generic fermentation process, and the animal study. And we can see that in the case of the animal study, I've actually fetched experiment 1. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Experiment 1 and the data from experiment 2. There's only one data point on experiment 2 because it was kind of a dummy experiment. Nevertheless, you get the idea. And here we have only fetched this explicit experiment, experiment 1, and in this case also experiment 1 on those other processes. This capability for accessing experimental data through Riffyn's API is applicable to R, to Spotfire, to basically any application that offers support for REST interfaces.